My son forgot to end the call, so I heard their conversation. "That old man won't last a day after our Thanksgiving surprise," he said. His wife added, "The house will be ours." I quietly pressed end call and dialed a number. 3 days later, I arrived at their house for a holiday dinner, but I wasn't alone. Their faces turned pale. I'm Gary Cole, 61 years old, and I never thought I'd be telling a story like this about my own family. But here we are. The grocery bags cut into my palms as I climbed the front steps of my Phoenix home. $108 worth of Thanksgiving supplies, turkey, cranberries, sweet potatoes, the works. My knees complained with each step, that familiar ache that never really went away anymore. 61 years old, and some days I felt every single one of them, especially since retiring early from the school district last year. The Arizona heat had been brutal this November, even for a longtime desert resident like me. I shifted the bags to fish out my keys, used my shoulder to push open the front door. The house was quiet. Blessed relief from the 95-degree afternoon outside. Danny and Brittany had left earlier that morning. Something about a job interview for Danny. I'd stopped asking for details months ago. Their answers were always vague, always promising, never leading anywhere. The kitchen counter welcomed me like an old friend. I set the bags down with a grunt of relief, already mentally organizing the next few days. Thanksgiving was my favorite holiday. Family around the table, everyone together, grateful for what we had. I'd invited Danny and Brittany to live here 9 months ago after Danny lost his construction job. The Phoenix housing market had been tough on contractors. Just temporary, they'd said. Just until we get back on our feet. That's when I noticed the tablet. It sat on the counter, screen glowing that soft blue. I frowned. I didn't remember leaving it on. The air conditioning hummed quietly, but otherwise the house was silent. My hand moved toward it, then froze mid-reach. "That old man won't last a day after our Thanksgiving surprise." Danny's voice, clear as crystal, coming from the tablet speaker. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The desert heat seemed to press in through the walls, despite the AC running full blast. Then Brittany's voice, bright with excitement. "The house will be ours. Finally we can sell it and get something in Scottsdale. Finally live somewhere decent." My hand gripped the edge of the counter. The world tilted sideways. Scottsdale, where the rich folks lived, where million-dollar homes sprawled across manicured desert landscapes. "He's been going on about family tradition and making a big dinner," Danny continued, and I could hear the smirk in his voice. Perfect timing. He'll never suspect anything. Their laughter filled my kitchen, in my house, the one I'd worked 32 years as a school superintendent to pay off. The house where Carol and I had raised Danny, where we'd planned to grow old together, before the aneurysm took her 8 years ago. I stood there at the threshold, grocery bags forgotten, listening to my son and his wife plan something that would ensure I wouldn't last a day. The video call was still active. They'd forgotten to hang up. I could see their faces on the screen now, animated and excited, discussing my house like it was already theirs. Danny's face had the same expression I remembered from Christmas morning when he was 8 years old, except now he was talking about my death. My hand moved without conscious thought. One finger, careful and quiet, tapped the red end call button. The screen went dark. Silence crashed over the kitchen like a wave, broken only by the steady hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of a neighbor's leaf blower fighting the endless desert dust. I pulled out a chair and sat down heavily, not trusting my legs anymore. One of the grocery bags tipped over. Apples rolled across the tile floor with hollow thuds that echoed in the emptiness. I watched them roll, red and perfect, scattering like my illusions. The tile was cool under my feet, a small comfort in a world that had just shifted beneath me. I'd bought food for them. I was planning to make them a feast, and they were planning, what exactly? My death? The words played on repeat in my mind. Won't last a day. Thanksgiving surprise. The house will be ours. I thought about the past 9 months, every bill I'd paid, every excuse I'd believed. Danny's job search that never ended despite Phoenix's booming construction market. Brittany's online courses that led nowhere. The money I'd given them. Thousands and thousands of dollars for interview clothes, networking events, training programs. How long had they been planning this? How long had I been a fool? My hands were shaking. I pressed them flat against the table, willing them to be still. 32 years I dealt with difficult situations. Angry parents, budget crises, staff conflicts. I'd managed entire school districts through financial emergencies and personnel disasters. I'd never backed down, never lost control. I raised you, I thought. I gave you everything. But I didn't say it out loud. There was no point. They weren't here to hear it. And even if they were, what would it change? I sat in that kitchen as the afternoon light shifted across the floor, filtering through the blinds in long golden bars. The desert sun was relentless, even in November. As the apples lay scattered and forgotten, as the groceries warmed on the counter, I sat there and felt something inside me break, then harden into something new. After a long time, I whispered to the empty room. I raised you. I gave you everything. My voice broke slightly on the last word. Then it hardened, matching what was happening inside my chest. Not anymore. The decision settled over me like a familiar coat. I wasn't a victim. I was a problem solver. That's what I'd always been. And this was just another problem to solve. The hours between, discovery and their return passed in a strange fog. I moved through the house like a ghost, putting away groceries with mechanical precision. Can of cranberries in the pantry, turkey in the refrigerator, potatoes in the bin. My hands knew what to do, even as my mind replayed those words on an endless loop. Won't last a day. The house will be ours. I picked up the scattered apples, washed them under the cold tap, set them in the fruit bowl, wiped down the counter with the same dish towel Carol had used for years. All the small tasks that made up a life, performed while the life fell apart around me. By early evening, I'd prepared dinner, pot roast with carrots and potatoes, comfort food I'd been making for 20 years. The aroma filled the house, competing with the faint scent of desert sage that somehow always found its way inside. I set the table. 3 plates, 3 sets of silverware, 3 glasses. Everything in its proper place. Everything except me. I wasn't the same man who'd left for the grocery store that morning. They came through the front door just after 6, and I heard them before I saw them. The blast of hot air from outside followed them in, along with Brittany's laugh, high and careless. The rustle of shopping bags, Danny's voice calling out, "Dad, we're home. Sorry we're late." The interview ran long. The lie flowed so easily. How many lies had I swallowed over the past 9 months? How many times had I nodded sympathetically while they spun tales of near misses and almost opportunities? I stood at the stove, my back to them, and took a careful breath before turning around. My face arranged itself into something that might pass for normal, pleasant, unsuspecting. The same expression I'd worn through thousands of school board meetings when I knew more than I let on. "How did it go?" I asked, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside. Brittany was already moving toward me, arms outstretched for a hug. She smelled like expensive perfume, the kind that cost more than she claimed to have. Victoria's Secret, probably $80 a bottle. Up close, I noticed her manicure, fresh and perfect, salon work, not home polish. Another $40 she didn't supposedly have. "Dad," she squeezed my shoulders with practiced affection. "How was your day? Did you rest those knees? This heat can't be good for your joints." The concern in her voice was so practiced, so perfect. I wondered how long she'd been acting. Had there ever been genuine affection, or had it always been performance? When she'd first started dating Danny, had her sweet smiles been real, or was she already calculating the value of an eventual inheritance? "Fine," I said. "Dinner's ready." We sat down together, the 3 of us, like we had hundreds of times before. But I saw everything differently now. The expensive coffee cups they'd left on the counter this morning, $6 lattes from that boutique place in Old Town Scottsdale while claiming poverty. Danny's fresh haircut, not Supercuts quality, but a real barbershop cut. That cost $35 easy. Brittany's new bracelet. Thin gold, catching the light from the pendant fixture Carol and I had installed 15 years ago. Danny launched into his story about the interview. He used industry jargon, made it sound legitimate. Project management position, competitive salary, just waiting on the background check. He'd always been a good talker, even as a kid. Could convince his mother to let him skip chores, talk teachers into deadline extensions. I'd thought it was charm. Now I wondered if it had always been manipulation. "There's just one thing," he said, glancing at Brittany with practiced timing. They'd rehearsed this scene, probably multiple times. A certification program, Brittany jumped in smoothly, like a relay runner taking the baton. It's exactly what Danny needs to guarantee placement. The company actually recommended it. How much? I asked, cutting into my pot roast with deliberate care. The meat was tender, perfectly cooked. Carol would have been proud. $800. Danny's voice carried just the right note of reluctance, as if he hated to ask. I know it's a lot, Dad. We hate asking, but this is finally our way out. We'll pay you back as soon as I start. First paycheck. I looked at him across the table. My son. The boy I'd taught to ride a bike on these same streets, helped with algebra homework at this same table. The teenager I'd driven to football practice every morning at 6 a.m. for 4 years. The young man who'd cried in my arms when his mother died. Where had that boy gone? Or had he always been this person, and I'd been too blind to see it? Had Carol seen something I'd missed? She'd always been more perceptive about people's motives. Watch that one, she'd say about certain parents at school events. They want something. I'd dismissed it as cynicism then. Now I wondered if she'd have seen through Danny and Brittany months ago. I'll think about it, I said quietly, setting down my fork. The words landed wrong. I watched them exchange a glance, quick and confused. Usually I agreed right away, pulled out my checkbook, happy to help, eager to be useful, to be needed, the helpful father, the reliable ATM. Of course, Danny said carefully, his smile faltering for just a moment. No pressure. Take your time. I need to check my account, I added, keeping my voice neutral. Make sure I can cover it without affecting my own bills. Brittany's smile tightened at the corners, like plastic wrap pulled too tight. Absolutely. We understand completely. We'd never want you to strain yourself financially. But her eyes said something different. Her eyes said she'd already counted that $800 as spent, already factored it into whatever calculations she was running in her head. The rest of dinner passed in near silence. I gave minimal responses. I see. That's interesting. They tried to fill the quiet with chatter about their day, about the weather, about plans for tomorrow. But I could feel them watching me, studying my face, uncertain about this. New version of Gary Cole who didn't immediately reach for his wallet. I'd changed the pattern, and predators always notice when their prey changes behavior. After they went to bed, early, as always, because they slept late and woke later, I sat alone in my study. The house creaked around me, settling into the desert night. Phoenix houses always made noise as they cooled down from the day's heat, the wood and drywall contracting with small pops and groans. I waited until I heard their bedroom door close, then waited another hour to be sure. At 11:30, I opened my laptop. The screen's glow illuminated my face in the dark room as I typed with slow, deliberate precision. Family law attorney, Phoenix. Property rights, Arizona, elder abuse lawyer. Each search opened new windows, new possibilities. I read reviews on Google and Yelp, checked credentials on the State Bar website, took notes in my old leather notebook. The same notebook I'd used for budget meetings and personnel evaluations. Left column, questions to ask. Right column, documents I'd need. Bottom of the page, timeline considerations. This was familiar territory. How many difficult situations had I navigated this way over 3 decades? Angry parents demanding special treatment for their children, budget cuts that threatened programs, staff conflicts that could have destroyed morale, union negotiations that lasted until 2 a.m. I didn't survive all that by being weak or foolish. This was just another problem to solve. A more personal one, certainly. A more painful one, definitely. But still a problem with a solution. Around midnight, I found what I was looking for. Anderson and Associates, a law firm specializing in elder law and family disputes. 5-star reviews across multiple platforms. Compassionate but tough, one client had written. Patricia Anderson saved my father from financial abuse by his caregiver, another. Professional, knowledgeable, and gets results. I wrote down the phone number in my notebook, underlined it twice with my red pen. Tomorrow I would call. Tomorrow I would start taking back what was mine. But tonight I sat in the darkness of my study, listening to the house settle around me, and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Purpose. The same feeling I'd had when facing down a hostile school board, or dealing with a crisis that threatens student safety. The clarity that comes when you stop being reactive and start being strategic. I closed the laptop and leaned back in my chair. Carol's father's old recliner, the one piece of furniture she'd insisted we keep when we got married. The leather was cracked now, worn smooth by decades of use, but it still held me the same way it had held him through his own troubles. What would Carol think of all this? Would she be disappointed in Danny, heartbroken? Or would she be proud of me for finally seeing clearly, for refusing to be a victim? I thought she'd be proud. Carol never tolerated users and manipulators. She'd fired a secretary once for stealing supplies, reported a teacher who was falsifying attendance records. Gary, she'd said, being kind doesn't mean being stupid. Don't let people mistake your generosity for weakness. I'd tried to live by that principle in my professional life, but somehow I'd failed to apply it at home. Maybe because he was my son. Maybe because after Carol died, I'd been so desperate not to lose Danny too, that I'd ignored every red flag, rationalized every lie, enabled every failure. Well, no more. I slept badly that night, 3 hours, maybe 4. But when I woke Tuesday morning, something had changed. The shock had crystallized into clarity. The hurt had transformed into resolve. I showered, shaved carefully with the same precision I'd used every morning for 40 years. Chose my navy blazer, the one I'd worn to countless important meetings. Old habits surfaced as I knotted my tie in the mirror. Carol had given me this tie for my 50th birthday. Navy blue with small gold patterns. Professional, but not flashy. You dressed for the meeting you needed to win. That was something Carol used to say, watching me get ready for particularly challenging school board sessions. Danny and Brittany's bedroom door remained closed as I left. They wouldn't surface until noon, as always. Their sleep schedule had become completely nocturnal since moving in. I wrote a note for the kitchen counter in my neat administrator's handwriting. Out for appointment, back this afternoon. Generic. Revealing nothing. The drive across Phoenix gave me time to think. My hands stayed steady on the wheel, despite the churning in my stomach. The morning traffic was lighter than usual. One advantage of retirement, avoiding the rush hour crush I'd endured for 32 years. The desert mountains rimmed the city in purple shadows, catching the early sunlight on their peaks. Anderson and Associates occupied the 3rd floor of a professional building near Central Phoenix Medical Center. Medical plaza, law offices, accounting firms. The kind of place where serious business got done. I arrived at 9:45 for my Tensage appointment, parked in the covered garage, and sat for 5 minutes breathing in the artificially cooled air. You can do this, I told myself, adjusting my tie in the rearview mirror. You've walked into harder meetings than this. Board meetings where parents screamed about their children's grades. Budget presentations where I had to justify cutting popular programs. Personnel hearings where I'd had to fire teachers I'd personally hired. This was just another meeting where I needed to advocate for what was right. The reception area had leather chairs the color of desert sand, legal journals on glass tables, soft jazz playing in the background. Other people came and went. Divorces, estate planning, business disputes. Everyone had problems. I wasn't special, except I refused to be a victim. Mr. Cole? The receptionist smiled warmly. She was about my age, graying hair styled professionally, kind. Eyes behind fashionable glasses. Ms. Anderson is ready for you. Patricia Anderson met me at her office door. Mid-50s, silver hair styled in a practical bob. Brown eyes that assessed me quickly but not unkindly. She wore a charcoal business suit and extended her hand with the confidence of someone who'd won difficult battles. Her handshake was firm, professional, but not intimidating. Gary. May I call you Gary? Please come in. Her office surprised me. Yes, there were the expected law books lining dark wood shelves, the substantial mahogany desk, the computer displaying case files, but also watercolor paintings of desert landscapes on the walls, family photos on the credenza, a young woman with children laughing at some family gathering, an older photo of Patricia with a teenage girl in graduation robes, both beaming with pride. She gestured to comfortable chairs by the window overlooking the Phoenix skyline, not the formal desk setup that would have put her in the power position. Coffee? She offered, moving to a small side table with a carafe and cups. I just made a fresh pot. Thank you. Black. She poured carefully, handed me the cup in delicate china. settled into the chair across from me, not above me, beside me, equal to equal. "Tell me what brought you here," she said gently, pulling out a legal pad but keeping her pen down. "Take your time. I've cleared the whole morning." I started formally, controlled, the voice I'd used for official presentations. "My son and his wife have been living with me for 9 months, rent-free. I've been supporting them financially while they supposedly search for work in the Phoenix job market." The words came easier than I expected. I described the grocery shopping, the forgotten tablet, the glowing screen. When I reached the part about hearing Danny's voice, "That old man won't last a day after our Thanksgiving surprise," my voice cracked slightly despite my efforts to maintain composure. Patricia's pen stopped mid-note. She looked up sharply, brown eyes suddenly intense. "They said that? Exactly those words? Won't last a day?" I nodded, meeting her gaze directly, word for word. Her expression hardened, though her voice remained gentle. "Gary, that's not just greed or inheritance impatience. That's potential conspiracy to harm an elder. We need to consider protective measures immediately, not just property law." Something loosened in my chest that I hadn't realized was clenched tight. She believed me. She understood the gravity. After months of feeling like I was going crazy, of second-guessing every doubt I'd had about their behavior, someone with legal expertise was confirming my worst fears were rational. "There's more," I said, and told her everything. The 9 months of increasingly elaborate excuses and lies, the thousands of dollars I'd given them for various opportunities and emergencies, Brittany's constant requests for more money disguised as concern for my welfare. How they looked at me now, or rather how they looked through me, seeing only an obstacle between themselves and my property. I pulled out my phone and played the brief recording I'd made. Not the whole conversation, just enough to prove I wasn't imagining things. Patricia listened with the intensity of someone who'd heard similar stories before, but never got used to the cruelty. When I finished, Patricia set down her pen and looked at me directly. "Gary, I'll help you," she said simply. Not, "I'm sorry this is happening," or "how terrible for you to go through this." Just a clear professional commitment. Not just with the legal aspects, with all of it. I've been practicing elder law for 15 years. Adult children who view their aging parents as obstacles rather than people. It's more common than you might think. It's abuse, and it's absolutely wrong. Relief hit me so hard I had to look away for a moment, focusing on the desert landscape painting behind her desk. A saguaro cactus stood sentinel against purple mountains. Classic Arizona imagery that somehow seemed both cliché and comforting at the same time. "Let's talk strategy," Patricia continued, pulling up documents on her computer screen. "You own the house outright? No co-signers, no joint ownership. Completely mine." The words felt good to say. Solid, certain. I inherited it from my parents in 1995, paid off the last mortgage payment 6 years ago. Good. That's our foundation. She turned the screen so I could see the Arizona revised statutes displayed in neat legal formatting. Property law in this state strongly protects owners, especially seniors. We can pursue eviction, but we need to be strategic about the approach. She outlined the process with the methodical precision I recognized from my own administrative work. Written notice demanding rent or vacating premises, 10-day response period, then court filings if they refused to leave. But there was a complication that made my stomach tighten. If they claim family residence by invitation without established terms, it could drag out for months, Patricia explained. Arizona courts are reluctant to quickly evict family members, especially if there's no written lease agreement. "Do you have anything in writing about their living arrangement?" I felt my heart sink. Of course I didn't have a formal lease with my own son. What father draws up contracts with his children? But then I remembered something, a detail that might matter. "I wrote something," I said slowly, accessing my phone. "Last winter, when Danny first moved in, I wrote a simple letter, something for his records. I thought documentation might help if he needed to prove he had somewhere to stay for job applications or benefits." I pulled out my phone, accessed my cloud storage. Years as a superintendent had taught me to keep everything organized, digitized. Paper trails were everything in education. Budget justifications, personnel decisions, policy changes. Everything needed documentation. There it was. A scanned letter dated February 15th of this year. "Dear whom it may concern," the letter read. This confirms that Daniel Cole has temporary permission to reside at 1247 Desert View Drive while he seeks employment and gets back on his feet financially. Signed, Gary Cole, property owner. Patricia's eyes lit up as she read it on my phone screen. May I photograph this? This is excellent evidence. Of course. She captured the image immediately, forwarding it to her case file with quick, efficient movements. See this word, temporary? That's our leverage. You established terms from the beginning. They were guests with a defined purpose, not tenants with rights. This changes everything. We spent the next hour planning with the systematic approach of two experienced professionals tackling a complex problem. She explained timelines, potential complications, what additional documentation I'd need. I pulled out the folder I'd brought, bank statements showing all the money I'd given them, utility bills in my name, the property deed, even receipts from their expensive purchases I'd been quietly collecting. You keep excellent records, Patricia noted approvingly, spreading the documents across her conference table like evidence in a trial. This level of organization will serve us well. 32 years in school administration teaches you that paper trails win battles, I replied. Every decision, every expenditure, every personnel action, it all had to be documented and defensible. Near the end of our meeting, she poured us both more coffee from her carafe. As she handed me my cup, our fingers touched briefly. She paused, studied my face with an expression that seemed more personal than professional. May I ask something that's not strictly legal? She said carefully. Are you doing this completely alone? Is there anyone else in your corner supporting you through this? The question hit deeper than I expected. No, I said quietly. My wife Carol passed 8 years ago. Aneurysm, completely unexpected. No other children. Danny was our only child. And now... I gestured helplessly at the document spread between us. Patricia was silent for a moment, her brown eyes showing understanding that went beyond professional sympathy. When she spoke, her voice carried a weight I recognized. Personal experience, not just professional knowledge. My husband David left 3 years ago, she said simply. Midlife crisis, secretary half his age, the whole cliché. After 22 years of marriage. She gestured to the graduation photo on her credenza. Sarah was just finishing high school. I understand what it means to face something difficult and feel completely alone. Our eyes met across the table. Something passed between us. Recognition, perhaps. Two people who'd survived significant loss and learned to keep going. Two people who understood that life could change completely in an instant, leaving you to rebuild everything you thought you knew about your place in the world. But you're not alone anymore, she added firmly, her voice returning to its professional strength but retaining the personal warmth. You have me in your corner now, and I don't lose cases like this. When I stood to leave, she walked me to the door personally, rather than having her secretary escort me out. She handed me her business card, then took it back and wrote something on the back in neat handwriting. My cell number, she said. Call any time. Weekends, evenings, middle of the night if you need to. This situation is too dangerous to wait for business hours. We shook hands again, longer this time, more personal than professional. Her grip was firm, reassuring. I walked out of that office differently than I'd entered, taller somehow, stronger, no longer facing this nightmare alone. Wednesday morning arrived with the kind of desert clarity that makes Phoenix beautiful, despite its harsh reputation. I woke before 7, dressed with purpose and the systematic precision of someone executing a plan. Patricia had given me a comprehensive list during yesterday's meeting. Change your will, get a property appraisal, document everything suspicious, and prepare for rapid legal action. I started with the will. Lawrence Wright's office sat in a strip mall between a tax preparation service and a State Farm insurance agency. The kind of practical, no-frills location where serious business got done without unnecessary overhead. Lawrence himself was mid-40s, precise in his movements, wearing reading glasses on a chain around his neck like a jeweler examining precious stones. Mr. Cole, let's review what we discussed on the phone yesterday, he said, walking me through each page of the document he'd prepared overnight. His finger traced the legal language as he explained each clause with the patience of someone who understood that most clients weren't lawyers. This provision ensures your son cannot contest the will based on being accidentally forgotten or overlooked. By leaving him exactly $1, you prove deliberate intent, not oversight. He looked at me over his glasses with the gravity the moment deserved. This paragraph establishes the Phoenix Education Foundation as sole beneficiary of your estate. They're a registered 501c3 nonprofit organization. No legal complications, no tax issues for them. I held the pen above the signature line, feeling the weight of what I was about to do. This was irreversible. I was disinheriting my son, the child I'd raised, the boy who'd once brought me Father's Day cards made from construction paper and glue. But that boy was gone, if he'd ever really existed. My hand didn't shake. I signed with firm, clear strokes, the same signature I'd used on thousands of graduation diplomas and disciplinary letters over 3 decades. Authority, finality, the signature of a man who made difficult decisions and lived with the consequences. Lawrence witnessed the document, then pressed his notary seal into the paper with a satisfying thunk that made it official. "This is legally binding now," he said. "Filed with the state, registered with the probate court system. Your son's inheritance is exactly $1, and not a penny more." I nodded, folding my copy carefully into my jacket pocket. No going back now, but I felt no regret, only a grim satisfaction that Danny and Brittany's entire plan had just evaporated, even if they didn't know it yet. I returned home around 2 that afternoon, parking in the driveway that I'd paid for, walking up steps I'd maintained, opening a door I owned free and clear. The house was quiet except for voices drifting from the living room. I walked past the doorway toward the kitchen, but something in their tone made me pause in the hallway where they couldn't see me. Danny and Brittany sat with their laptops open like traders working a particularly profitable stock deal. Brittany's screen showed Zillow listings, houses in Scottsdale, Paradise Valley, the expensive parts of the Phoenix metro area. Price range $400,000 to $550,000. Dream homes with golf course views and swimming pools that sparkled like jewels in the desert sun. Danny's screen displayed something that made my blood go cold. A mortgage calculator and investment spreadsheet. I could read the numbers clearly from my angle. House sale price, $285,000. Minus 6% realtor fees are $268,200. Minus closing costs, $3,000, the far $265,200 net. Down payment on new house, $50,000. Remaining cash, $250,200 for investments and lifestyle. They'd already calculated it down to the last dollar. Already planned exactly how to spend my property, my life's work, the home where Carol and I had built our marriage and raised our family. I took several photos with my phone set to silent mode, careful to capture both screens clearly. Documentation. Evidence. The kind of proof that would hold up in court and show premeditation. "The timing is perfect," Brittany was saying, scrolling through luxury home photos like she was shopping for groceries. Thanksgiving dinner, family gathering, everyone together. Old people have heart attacks all the time during stressful family meals. "And we've been such devoted caregivers," Danny added with a laugh that chilled me to the bone. "Living here to help him, sacrificing our own opportunities to make sure he's okay. Everyone will see how tragic it is. The insurance investigator won't find anything suspicious," Brittany continued. "Just a sad old man who got overexcited cooking for his family. Maybe had a little too much wine with dinner." My phone was still recording video, capturing their voices, their faces, their casual discussion of my murder, as if they were planning a vacation. "How much of those pills do you think we'll need?" Danny asked. "The whole bottle crushed up in his wine. With his blood pressure medication, it should be more than enough. Quick and quiet. I had heard enough, more than enough." I backed away from the doorway exactly the way I'd approached, careful steps along the wall where the old floorboards didn't creak. In my study, I connected my phone to my laptop and uploaded everything to cloud storage, then emailed copies to Patricia with a simple message. "Evidence attached. They're planning it for tomorrow." Her reply came back within minutes. "Jesus, Gary, this is attempted murder conspiracy. I'm calling the foundation and the DA's office right now. Do not be alone with them tonight." I looked at my phone, then at the closed study door. Somewhere in this house, the people I'd fed and sheltered and loved were planning to kill me in less than 24 hours. They were shopping for houses to buy with my money, calculating returns on investments they'd make with my life insurance, planning their alibis for my funeral. The smart thing would be to leave, check into a hotel, let Patricia handle everything through the courts, stay safe while the legal system slowly ground through the evidence. But I wasn't feeling particularly smart. I was feeling angry, betrayed, and absolutely determined to make sure they got exactly what they deserved. I called Patricia back. "I'm not leaving," I told her. "This is my house, and I'm not running from two parasites who think they can murder me in my own kitchen. Gary, this is dangerous. If they suspect they won't suspect anything. I've been playing the clueless old man for 9 months. I can manage one more day." There was a long pause. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking," I said slowly, "that justice should be poetic, and I know exactly how to make sure it is." Thursday morning, Thanksgiving Day, arrived with the crisp clarity that only desert mornings can provide. The temperature had dropped to a pleasant 65 degrees overnight, a blessed relief from the unseasonable heat we'd been having. I woke at 6 a.m., not from an alarm, but from the nervous energy coursing through my system like electricity. Today was the day they planned to kill me. Today was also the day I'd turn their plan against them. But first, I had one final piece of business to complete. Patricia had arranged an emergency meeting with Helen Martinez from the Phoenix Education Foundation for 8 a.m. Emergency property transfers weren't common, but elder abuse cases demanded immediate action. The foundation offices were located in a renovated Craftsman house in the historic Roosevelt district, the kind of neighborhood where old Phoenix charm survived the sprawling modernization. Helen Martinez met us in the conference room that had probably once been a dining room when the house was someone's family home. Now it was filled with the tools of nonprofit administration, filing cabinets, a conference table that had seen better days, and walls lined with photos of scholarship recipients, young faces full of hope and determination. "Mr. Cole," Helen said, spreading documents across the table with the efficiency of someone who'd handled complex property transfers before. "Ms. Anderson has explained the urgency of your situation. I want you to understand exactly what this means before we proceed." She walked me through each section, with the methodical care required by law. Helen was probably in her late 40s, with graying hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, and the kind of competent demeanor I recognized from my best teachers. "This is permanent," she emphasized, looking at me directly. "Once filed with Maricopa County, you cannot reverse this transfer. The Phoenix Education Foundation will own your property outright. You retain irrevocable lifetime residency rights, but you cannot sell the house, cannot will it to heirs, cannot change your mind." "I understand completely," I said, meeting her gaze steadily. "That's exactly what I want. My son has made it clear he sees this house only as a financial asset. I prefer it serve a higher purpose." Helen's expression showed the kind of understanding that didn't need to be voiced. She'd probably seen other families torn apart by greed, other elderly clients forced to protect themselves from their own children. "Then this is absolutely the right choice," she said simply. My hand was steady as I signed each page. Gary Cole, in my clear administrator's handwriting. Page after page, initials here, signature there. Patricia signed as witness, her presence adding legal weight to every line. Helen signed as the foundation's representative. Grace, an elderly notary with gentle hands and sharp eyes, stamped each document with her official seal, the metallic thunk echoing in the quiet room like a judge's gavel. "I need to photograph these documents for immediate electronic filing," Helen said, pulling out a high-resolution camera. "Arizona allows same-day property transfers in cases of elder abuse prevention." The camera flashed repeatedly, capturing every page, every signature, every official seal. Helen uploaded the files directly to the county recorder's system from her laptop, typing rapidly with the skill of someone who'd navigated government bureaucracy for years. "As of this moment," Helen announced, checking her computer screen, "the Phoenix Education Foundation owns 1247 Desert View Drive, Phoenix, Arizona, and Gary Cole has irrevocable lifetime right to occupy the property." It was done. The house Danny and Brittany planned to inherit no longer belonged to me. Their entire scheme, the murder, the insurance money, the Scottsdale mansion, the investment portfolio, had just become worthless. I returned home around 10:30 that morning, pulling into the driveway of a house I no longer owned, but would live in for the rest of my natural life, however long that might be. The irony wasn't lost on me. Danny and Brittany were already awake, surprisingly early for them. I could hear movement in the kitchen as I entered, pots rattling, cabinet doors opening and closing. They were nervous, I realized. Today was their big day, their moment to finally claim what they thought was theirs. "Morning, Dad," Danny called out as I hung my jacket in the hall closet. "We thought we'd get started on the cooking early. Help you with the heavy lifting?" How thoughtful, I thought, making sure I didn't strain myself on my last day alive. "That's very considerate," I replied, walking into the kitchen where they stood like actors waiting for their cue. "I picked up a few things yesterday we might need." Brittany was already at the stove, stirring something in a large pot. Her movement seemed forced, overly cheerful. "I'm making the stuffing from scratch, just like you taught me." She'd never actually asked me to teach her anything about cooking, but today she was playing the devoted daughter-in-law. Danny stood at the counter, supposedly chopping vegetables for the side dishes, but I could see him glancing repeatedly at Brittany's purse sitting on the counter, the purse that undoubtedly contained whatever pills they planned to use. "What time do you want to eat?" Danny asked, his voice carrying just the right note of family concern. "How about 4 o'clock?" I suggested. "That gives us plenty of time to prepare everything properly." "Perfect," Brittany said, turning to smile at me. The same bright smile she'd been giving me for 9 months. I wondered how I'd ever thought it was genuine. The morning passed in a surreal dance of fake domesticity. We moved around each other in the kitchen, preparing what they assumed would be my last meal, making small talk about the weather, the neighbors, the television shows we'd been watching. Normal family conversation, except that 2 of us were planning murder and the third was planning justice. Around 2 p.m., I excused myself to make some phone calls. "Just checking in with a few old colleagues," I told them. "You know how retirees are. We like to stay connected." In my study, I sent a final text to Patricia. "Ready, everything in place, see you at 4:30. Her response was immediate. Police briefed and standing by. Foundation documents filed. "You sure about this?" "Never been more sure of anything. Be careful, Gary. I've grown rather fond of you." I stared at that last message for a long moment, feeling something warm unfold in my chest despite everything else. "Likewise," I typed back. At 3:45, I began setting the table for what Danny and Brittany thought would be 3 people. But I set 4 places, 4 sets of silverware, 4 glasses. When Brittany noticed, she looked confused. "Expecting someone else, Dad?" "Just being optimistic," I said with a smile. "You never know who might drop by on Thanksgiving." At 4 p.m. sharp, we sat down to what Danny and Brittany believed would be my final meal. The dining room table looked beautiful in the late afternoon light filtering through the blinds, turkey golden and perfect, stuffing steaming in Carol's good serving bowl, cranberry sauce gleaming like jewels in cut crystal. A traditional feast that would have made my wife proud. If only she could see what our son had become. "This looks incredible, Dad," Danny said, his voice carrying just the right note of gratitude. "You've outdone yourself." "Family traditions matter," I replied, unfolding my napkin with deliberate care. "Some things are worth preserving." Brittany stood up with practiced smoothness. "I'll pour the wine," she announced, reaching for the bottle of Cabernet I'd selected. A good vintage, but not too expensive. No point in wasting the really good stuff on murderers. She took the bottle and 3 glasses to the kitchen counter, positioning herself just out of my direct line of sight. But I'd spent the morning strategically placing a small mirror on the spice rack, angled perfectly to reflect her actions. I watched her pull a small plastic bag from her purse with the smooth efficiency of someone who'd rehearsed this moment. Watched her crush white tablets with the back of a spoon, the powder falling like snow into one specific glass. Watched her stir it quickly with her finger, then wipe her finger clean on a napkin. 3 years of community theater in high school had taught me how to control my expression, how to keep my face blank while my mind raced. The dosage looked massive, enough to kill a horse, let alone a 61-year-old man with blood pressure medication in his system. She brought the glasses back on a tray, her smile bright and loving. The poison glass went directly in front of my place setting, exactly where I'd expected it to go. "Shall we make a toast?" she asked sweetly. But before anyone could lift their glass, I stood up. Actually, I forgot something in the kitchen, the gravy boat. I walked to the kitchen with unhurried steps, and in the 30 seconds I was out of their sight, I executed the simplest part of my plan. My glass moved 6 inches to the right. Danny's glass moved 6 inches to the left. 2 seconds of careful positioning that I'd practiced yesterday with coffee cups until I could do it blindfolded. When I returned with the gravy boat, neither of them noticed anything different. They were both too nervous, too focused on the performance they thought they needed to give. Danny raised his glass with trembling hands. "To Dad," he said, his voice thick with emotion that might even have been genuine. "You've given us everything. A roof over our heads, food on our table, endless patience and love. We're so grateful." The bitter irony almost made me laugh out loud. "To family," I replied, lifting what had been Danny's clean glass. "May we all get exactly what we deserve." "To new beginnings," Brittany added, her voice bright with anticipation of the fortune she thought was coming. We drank. Danny took a large gulp. He was nervous, thirsty, eager to get this over with. I sipped carefully from the clean glass. Brittany drank from hers, completely unaware that she'd just toasted her own downfall. We began eating, making the kind of forced conversation that fills uncomfortable silences. The weather, the neighbors, plans for Black Friday shopping that Brittany would never make. Danny complimented the turkey. Brittany praised the stuffing. I ate steadily, watching them both with new eyes. About 15 minutes into the meal, Danny's fork clattered to his plate. "Dad," he said slowly, blinking hard. I feel... His words began to slur, his eyes unfocused. His head nodded forward, then jerked back up as he fought against whatever was happening to him. "Danny?" Brittany's voice climbed higher. "Danny, what's wrong?" But Danny couldn't answer. His body was shutting down as the massive dose of sedatives, the dose meant for me, coursed through his system. He slumped forward, his head hitting the table with a dull thud that seemed to echo through the sudden silence. Brittany screamed and grabbed his shoulders, shaking him frantically. "Danny, wake up! What's happening?" I stood calmly and walked to the front door. "I should get that," I said. "Get what?" Brittany spun around, her face wild with panic. "What are you talking about? We need to call 911. That won't be necessary," I said as the doorbell rang. "Right on schedule." I opened the door wide. Patricia stood there in her professional charcoal suit, looking every inch the successful attorney she was. Behind her, Helen Martinez from the foundation, carrying a leather portfolio thick with documents. 2 Phoenix police officers in uniform, David Torres and Maria Santos, both looking appropriately serious. Behind them, paramedics stood ready with a gurney and medical equipment. "Please come in," I said, stepping aside with a slight bow. "You're just in time for dessert." They filed into my dining room with the practiced efficiency of professionals who'd coordinated this moment carefully. Brittany stood frozen at the table, her hand still on Danny's unconscious shoulder, her face cycling rapidly through confusion, fear, and the dawning horror of understanding. Patricia set her portfolio on the table next to Carol's good china and opened it with deliberate ceremony. She extracted documents like a dealer laying out cards. "Brittany Cole," she said in her courtroom voice, cold and official. "This is Helen Martinez from the Phoenix Education Foundation. As of this morning, they own this house. Here's the deed transfer filed with Maricopa County at 10:47 a.m. Brittany's voice cracked like thin ice. "What? That's not possible? This house belongs to Gary. When he dies, it goes to Danny. Very possible, very legal, very permanent." Patricia spread more documents across the table like evidence in a trial. "Mr. Cole has lifetime residency rights. You and your husband have nothing. You never did." Officer Torres stepped forward, pulling on latex gloves. "And we're here because Mr. Cole filed a detailed report Tuesday about threats to his safety, backed up by recorded evidence of conspiracy to commit harm." Officer Santos approached the table with a camera, photographing everything methodically. The table setting, the position of the glasses, Danny's unconscious form, the remaining food. Then she carefully bagged Danny's wine glass, labeling it with case numbers and timestamps. "Ma'am," she said to Brittany, "please step away from him. The paramedics need access." The EMTs moved in with professional speed, checking Danny's vitals, preparing him for transport. His pulse was weak but steady. He'd live, but he'd be unconscious for hours. Officer Torres picked up Brittany's purse from the kitchen counter. "Ma'am, this is yours. We have a warrant to search it." He opened it right there, in full view of everyone. The pill bottle sat on top like an accusation. Prescription sedatives with yesterday's date, nearly empty. "Those are mine," Brittany said desperately. "For anxiety. I have a prescription." "A prescription filled yesterday," Officer Santos noted, reading the label. 30 pills, only 3 left. "Where are the other 27? Silence stretched like a held breath. "I believe," I said quietly, breaking the tense silence, "you'll find those missing pills dissolved in that wine glass, the one my son just drank from." Brittany's face went through a remarkable transformation, from panic to rage to something approaching understanding. She turned to stare at me, her perfectly made-up eyes wide with a mixture of horror and grudging recognition. "You knew," she whispered. "You switched the glasses." I met her gaze steadily, feeling calmer than I had in months. "Yes, I did. You poisoned your own son." "I protected myself," I replied with the same tone I'd used for difficult parents during my superintendent years. "You prepared that drink for me. Danny drank what you intended for me to drink. The responsibility for what happened to him lies entirely with you." Officer Santos held up the bagged wine glass, now labeled as evidence. "This glass will be tested for foreign substances. We also have the pill bottle from your purse, the recorded conversations Mr. Cole provided, and the financial evidence showing your motive." Patricia stepped forward, her courtroom presence filling the room. "Officers, I believe you have everything you need to proceed." Officer Torres began reading Brittany her rights in that flat, official tone that makes everything suddenly real. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." As the Miranda warning continued, the paramedics loaded Danny onto the gurney. His face was pale but peaceful. He looked younger somehow, like the boy I remembered from years ago, before greed and entitlement had hardened his features. "He'll be fine," one of the EMTs assured me as they prepared to leave. "Sedated, but stable. He'll wake up in a few hours with nothing worse than a massive headache and some very serious legal problems." They wheeled him out through the front door, followed by Brittany in handcuffs, her designer clothes and perfect manicure looking incongruous with the steel bracelets around her wrists. She didn't look back at me, didn't say goodbye, didn't even curse me as they loaded her into the patrol car. I stood in my doorway, watching the convoy of police cars and ambulances disappear into the desert sunset, their red and blue lights painting the saguaro cacti in my neighbor's yard. When the last vehicle turned the corner, I was left standing with Patricia and Helen Martinez in the sudden quiet of my living room. "Well," Patricia said, settling onto my couch with a small smile, "that went exactly according to plan." Helen gathered up her foundation documents, neat and precise. "Mr. Cole, I need you to understand what happens next with the property. The foundation will handle all maintenance and utilities. In return, we'd like to host monthly gatherings for retired educators, informal meetings, maybe some guest speakers, continuing education opportunities." I felt something brighten inside my chest for the first time in months. I'd love to participate. 32 years in education. I miss the collaboration, the sense of purpose. Perfect. The foundation serves over 200 scholarships annually. Your home will become part of that legacy. After Helen left, Patricia and I sat in the living room where this nightmare had begun. The Thanksgiving dinner still sat on the table, largely untouched, growing cold. Carol's good china reflected the lamplight, beautiful and somehow sad. "How do you feel?" Patricia asked. I considered the question seriously, relieved, angry, sad. I paused, looking toward the kitchen, where I'd overheard that fateful conversation just 3 days ago. "Mostly, I feel like I've been holding my breath for 9 months, and I can finally breathe again." Patricia reached over and took my hand. Her fingers were warm, steady. "The legal process will take time. Attempted poisoning, conspiracy to commit harm, elder abuse. They're looking at serious prison time. The prosecutor is talking about plea deals, but even with cooperation, Danny's looking at 3 years minimum. And Brittany, she was the mastermind. The pills were in her purse. The plan was her idea according to the recordings. 5 years, probably more." I nodded, feeling neither satisfaction nor regret, just a sense that justice had been served according to law rather than emotion. "What happens to them after they're released?" Patricia squeezed my hand gently. "They'll be on probation, likely with no contact orders. They'll have criminal records that make employment difficult. And of course, they have no inheritance to fall back on. Exactly the situation they planned for me," I observed. Poetic justice. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the desert sunset paint the walls gold and orange through the windows. Phoenix sunsets were spectacular, especially in November, when the air was clear and the mountains stood sharp against the sky. Patricia, I said eventually, I owe you more than legal fees. She turned to face me more fully. You don't owe me anything, Gary. This is what I do. Protect people who can't protect themselves from family members who've lost their way. You did more than that. You believed me when I thought I was going crazy. You gave me hope when I felt completely alone. Our eyes met, and I saw something there that went beyond professional courtesy or even friendship. Can I ask you something personal? I said. Of course. When this legal mess is settled, when the trials are over and the appeals are exhausted, would you like to have dinner with me? Somewhere that isn't a law office or a crime scene? Patricia's smile was the first completely genuine expression I'd seen from anyone in months. I'd like that very much. And maybe afterward, we could talk about travel. I've been retired for a year and haven't been anywhere farther than the grocery store. I think it's time to see some of the world. Where would you want to go? I thought about it. Somewhere I've never been. Somewhere with no bad memories, no history, no expectations. Somewhere we could just be two people getting to know each other without lawyers and police and family drama. That sounds perfect. Outside, the desert night was settling in with its particular stillness. No traffic noise, no sirens. Just the quiet that comes when the day's heat finally releases its grip and lets the world breathe. My house, the Foundation's house, felt peaceful for the first time since Danny and Brittany had moved in. The air seemed cleaner somehow, lighter. 6 months later, I stood in my kitchen, the Foundation's kitchen, preparing coffee for the monthly retired educators meeting. The same kitchen where I'd overheard Danny and Brittany planning my death, now buzzed with the conversation of 12 former teachers and administrators sharing stories, resources, and the kind of professional camaraderie I'd missed more than I realized. Gary, this Colombian blend is fantastic, called out Margaret Stevens, who'd been a high school principal for 30 years. Where did you find it? A little shop in Sedona, I replied, smiling at the memory. Patricia and I discovered it last month during our weekend trip. The trials had concluded in March. Danny pleaded guilty to attempted assault with a dangerous substance and conspiracy to commit elder abuse. 3 years probation, 500 hours of community service at Phoenix Senior Centers, and a 5-year no-contact order. He'd cried during sentencing, claiming he'd been manipulated and pressured by Brittany. Maybe that was true. Maybe it wasn't. It didn't matter anymore. Brittany had fought the charges, hired an expensive attorney, claimed she was innocent of everything, except being married to a weak man. The jury convicted her on all counts after deliberating for less than 2 hours. 5 years in Arizona State Prison, restitution payments to cover my legal fees, and a lifetime ban from contacting me. They'd lost everything, exactly as they'd planned for me to lose everything. Their credit was ruined, their reputations destroyed, their future prospects permanently damaged. The house they'd dreamed of buying in Scottsdale would remain a dream forever. I felt neither satisfaction nor sorrow about their fate. Justice had been served according to law, and that was enough. Gary, could you help me with these scholarship applications? Helen Martinez asked, spreading folders across my dining room table. The same table where the poisoned wine had sat 6 months ago. Now it served education instead of betrayal, hope instead of greed. Of course, I said, settling into the chair where I'd once feared for my life. What are we looking at this month? 15 applications for the Cole Memorial Education Scholarships, Helen said, her voice warm with pride. When you donated the house, the foundation created this scholarship program in Carol's memory. These kids are remarkable, first-generation college students, mostly from underserved communities. I looked at the applications, at young faces filled with determination and dreams. A girl from South Phoenix who wanted to be a math teacher. A boy from the reservation who'd grown up speaking Navajo and wanted to create bilingual education programs. A teenager from a migrant family who'd moved 14 times before graduating high school, but still maintained a 4.0 GPA. Carol would have loved this, I said quietly. She always believed education was the great equalizer. These scholarships will help send 20 students to college next year, Helen continued. Your house gift has grown into something much larger than property. It's become a legacy of opportunity. After the meeting ended and everyone had gone home, Patricia and I sat on the back patio watching the desert sunset. We did this most evenings now, sometimes talking, sometimes just enjoying the comfortable silence of two people who'd found unexpected partnership later in life. "Good meeting tonight," Patricia said, her hand finding mine. "I love watching you with those educators. You light up when you talk about teaching." "I never realized how much I missed it until I got it back," I admitted. "For 9 months, I felt useless, unnecessary. Now I feel like I have purpose again." "You saved yourself, Gary, but you also created something beautiful from something terrible." I thought about that. How the worst betrayal of my life had led to some of the best things. The foundation scholarships that would help dozens of young people. The monthly gatherings that kept retired educators connected and engaged. The relationship with Patricia that had grown from professional to personal to something approaching love. "Danny sent another letter," Patricia mentioned carefully. "I know. I saw it. I threw it away." This was the 4th letter in 6 months, all saying essentially the same thing. He was sorry. He'd been weak. He wanted to make amends, to have a relationship with his father again. The letters felt calculated rather than genuine, probably written on advice from his probation officer. "Do you think you'll ever respond?" Patricia asked. I considered the question seriously. Maybe someday. If he serves his full sentence, completes his community service, proves he's actually changed rather than just saying the words. But not anytime soon. And never unless I'm convinced it's real. That seems wise. I left the door open for reconciliation, but he has to earn it, and I'm not holding my breath. Patricia squeezed my hand gently. "Speaking of the future, have you thought more about our trip to Italy? Every day. September still work for you?" "Perfect. The courts will be slow, my caseload manageable. 2 weeks in Tuscany sounds like heaven." I smiled, thinking about plans that had nothing to do with legal battles or family betrayal. Wine tasting in Chianti, art museums in Florence, cooking classes in small villages where the pace of life hadn't changed in centuries. "You know what the best part is?" I said. "What's that?" "For the first time in years, I'm looking forward instead of backward, planning adventures instead of managing crises, building something instead of protecting something." The sun touched the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that only Arizona sunsets could achieve. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to its pack, a wild sound that reminded you this desert had been here long before cities, long before human drama, long before family betrayals and legal battles. "Gary," Patricia said softly, "I'm proud of you. You could have become bitter, could have let what they did poison your whole outlook. Instead, you turned it into something positive." I thought about Danny and Brittany, wherever they were tonight. He was probably in some subsidized housing, working whatever job would hire someone with his record, counting the days until his probation ended. She was in a prison cell, angry and unrepentant, blaming everyone but herself for the choices that had led her there. They'd tried to take everything from me, my life, my home, my future, my dignity. Instead, they'd given me something I hadn't expected. Clarity about what really mattered. I had a home I could live in forever. I had work that gave my retirement meaning. I had a woman who saw me as a partner, not a resource. I had years ahead of me filled with possibility instead of fear. They'd planned my ending. Instead, they'd given me a new beginning. The desert night settled around us, peaceful and infinite, and I realized I'd never been happier. Justice had been served. Love had been found. Life was good.